Hello everyone, my name is Shushang from the University of Science and Technology of China, and today I will present automatic insecurity exploring email auto-configuration in the wild, and it is a collaborative work with Tsinghua University and Beihang University. And here is an example of the email account setup. And typically, all users only need to input is the email address and the password. But actually, there are lots of configuration parameters when client establish connection to a server, such as the protocol, host name, the port number, and the connection security type. So how the client fill in these configurations and where to get it? Email auto-configuration is automates the configuration process in email clients. And we identify 6 common auto-configuration mechanisms involving both servers and clients, and including 3 standardized or to-be mechanisms. For example, the auto-discover proposed by Outlook and auto-config by the Thunderbird and SRV service discovery from the IETF. Besides, depend on different client implementations, they also have built-in lists on heuristic guessing and default settings. And so let's look at how email auto-configuration works. And first, email administrators and publish configurations in web or DNS servers. And here is an example, configuration file example of the auto-discover and auto-config. And we can see that there are lots of configuration parameters. And for example, the server or host name determines the destination to which the client connects. And the SSL encryption or socket type determine where an encrypted connection is required. And for another mechanism is DNS SRV, and it's a method for locating email submission and access service, and specify the host name, the port number, and the connection type. And when multiple records exist, the records with the lower priority value is preferred. In this example of service records, we can see that the second record is preferred. And the next, client can now receive configuration through an HTTP or DNS request. Or besides, a client can also refer to other mechanisms. Also, let's focus on how auto-config request process. And first, a client need to access the domain part of an email address, and then construct a list of candidate URLs based on specified URL patent. And auto-config also provides a fallback mechanism and allowing the clients to construct a request based on max host name. And then if client cannot receive configurations through a real-time request, it can also check and import the configuration files from their local file. And for auto-discover, there is a similar construction process. And for SRV request, RFC documents define 6 service levels based on the combination of the protocol and the secure mechanisms. The main difference between these two types of levels is where the S surface in the service level, which implies where the connection is from the implicit TLS. Besides, client can also rely on built-in configuration information for popular mail providers. For example, the ISPDB maintained by the Thunderbird is widely used on the client side. So in this paper, we address 2 research questions. The first, what security threats exist in email auto-configuration? Is the configuration information transmitted securely? And does server provide configuration instructing client to establish secure connections? And the second question is, how extensive is their impact on email service? How many misconfigured servers or poorly implementation clients are there? We classify the attack goal into 2 types. The type 1 is connecting to attack control servers, where the attacker can compromise the configuration file or temporary configuration, and finally make the client establish connections to the attack control server. And the type 2 is leaking credentials, where the attackers can exploit the insecure connection between the email client and the email server, and finally stealing credentials. Here is an attack case about the about type 1 attack. It arises from the inadequate effective top-level domain validation when client executing the domain part of an email address to construct an auto-config request. And for admin at example.conf, the following conditions are required. First, example.conf has not deployed auto-config. And the second, the max hostname for example.conf is an effective top-level domain +1, for example, the provider.co.uk. And the third is attacker can reject auto-config .co.uk. So let's look how it works. First, a client will execute the domain part to construct a candidate list. And as the server does not support auto-config, so all requests will fail. Okay, so the client now fall back to request a DNS request and to obtain the max hostname. And at this time, if the attacker has registered the auto-config domain and it can control the configuration file, so the fully implemented client now will proceed to construct a URL request based on the max hostname and then connect to the attack-controlled web server. So now the attacker can specify arbitrary configurations in the configuration file and make the client to establish connections to the server. For another case, it's about the type 2 attack. It arises from the inconsistent connection type in the configuration file. And for example, the server publish both auto-config and auto-discover at the same time, but the configurations content were inconsistent. For example, they have the auto-config with TLS protection, while the auto-discover is plain text. So let's look at how it works. First is client initiates auto-config request. However, the attacker can intercept and drop all packets related to auto-config, and leaving the client only with the plain text auto-discover settings. And this opens the door for downgrade the connection from TLS protection to the plain text. And so we finally summarize 10 attack scenarios, including 2 type 1 attack scenarios and 8 type 2 attack scenarios. And these attack scenarios involving 17 defects arise from the server configuration or the client implementation. And then to evaluate these defects in the wild, we conduct a server scanning and the client testing. For server side, we measure more than 1 million domains, and we develop a custom Golang-based crawler. And from client side, we test 29 clients from 5 platforms. And we built a test platform consists of mail, web, or DNS servers. And finally, we evaluate them separately. And okay, let's look at the results. For server results, we found that the deployment of auto-configuration mechanisms is common. However, few domains have added SRV records. We can see that about 7% of domain have support the auto-configuration. For the defect evaluation results, we found that misconfiguration is prevalent in email auto-configuration deployments. About 61% are misconfigured, including 19 in the top rank 1,000 list. And specifically, we found that more than half of servers allowed configuration files to be transmitted in over a plain text connection. And we found that having the parameter settings correctly, securely, and consistently is challenging. About 14% face a reduction in connection security. So here is a real-world examples. The server administrator have a layer on POP3 set with the plain text, while IMAP with the encrypted. But the POP3 take precedence over the IMAP in the connection order. And on the right case is about the server administrator incorrectly set the element values. For example, they set the start here as which is out of the definition of this element. So for client results, we found that most client implementations have flaws that compromise connection security. About 13 clients could lead to the victim connecting to attack control server. And about 6 clients initiate only plain text requests, For example, the K-mail. And we found the next cron mail use docked as delimiter when constructing autoconfig request. And besides, we found 19 clients were susceptible to downgrade to plain text or star TLS. And for example, the mail sprint has an outdated built-in list, last update 3 years ago, which prevents it from connecting to the provider using the latest configuration. Besides, at least 71 domains in SPDB and had outdated configurations. For UI notifications, it's also bad. 21 clients did not prompt the users to confirm the results. So this is an overview of the client results. The auto configuration mechanisms is widely deployed in client, but most of them have a flawed implementation. We propose 3 mitigations. About first is enforcing secure connections, especially in clients. And the second, the administrators and developers should check and update configuration regularly. And we also released open source tool for facilitate administrators to check this. And the third is implementing professional clients. We should consider how to balance the effectiveness and the security. So to conclude, we conduct the first systematic analysis of the secure threats in email auto-configuration mechanisms, and followed by extensive measurements to evaluate the real-world impact of these threats. And finally, we found widespread flaws in server deployments and client implementations. So let's all thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thank you for the interesting presentation. We have time for 2 questions. I was looking at the paper, and you mentioned in your mitigation, the 3rd point when you were talking about implementing professional clients. So what requirements would you actually look for when you're thinking about professional clients? So what do you expect them to do? So can you go back to your mitigation slide?
Mitigation.
Yeah, implementing professional clients. So what do you expect them to do? What do you expect the professional clients to do?
I think security is the most important, right? Especially for users. So I don't think we should follow effectiveness and sacrifice the security. So I think we should, for effectiveness, we should consider always the TLS, right? So anyway, TLS is first. So I think it's right. Yeah, TLS is best. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you one more time for a
very
interesting presentation. Thank you.